Tall Tales. The Nymph Symphony.
Chapters.
Chapter 37. Inferno. After clearing the thin graveyard corridor, as inconspicuously as we could, I was personally trying to leave all that I saw in the darkness behind me. I had taken front position once again and chosen to forcefully pull open the splintered and slightly unhinged left door board in order to widen the gap for everyone else in that corridor to come and pass through before me, holding open its theater room doors for those I knew intimately, as well as the few among us that I didn't know at all. Upon entering the great church hall last, I was both surprised and startled by how strong and blinding the glare of the main room was, accompanied by just how loud and reinvigorated the commotion of a background noise became while I looked out amidst a colossal-sized crowd all standing in perfectly aligned rows, idle chatting with one another, each member settling in perfectly among their imaginary aisles. All of my own companions had spread out and entered into separate rows as they began to consort or blend in with the seatless audience, becoming completely indistinguishable to me before I got a chance to scout where any of them even were in the room. The only thing I could recognize for sure was one huge blackened marble portal stone that had been erupted from the earth and repositioned up on stage in the center of two burned-up curtain lines and their frizzy former wiring that spat out from each corner. Torches were flaring with a great intensity along all four of its walls, brightly lit as they were in very close concentration with one another. All of the former church pews had been ripped up and scattered along those walls for firewood, while half a dozen glass-stained portraits still glowed up on those slopes of the ceiling, one in between every wooden roof panel, showing detailed images of bubbling lava fissures in deep-sea caves as others depicted heavenly cities up in the clouds. Precious glass artwork somehow pristine and fracture-free, giving a mix of milky white, ocean blue, and lava-red tinges that blended with each other under the pale moonlight outside as it beamed down like a spotlight onto the blank and empty curtainless stage near where the king and queen sat upon their thrones. The whole room was miraculously well preserved when compared to the long and narrow candle-lit memorial corridor we had just exited from. Other than a few patch jobs and some interior decorating problems for the most part, the building itself was structurally sound. I mean, the stone walls were as dark and grubby as oily tar, much as if they were partially blackened by the ash of burnt felt that once remained there, as about 3 or 4 tall roof windows out of the dozen were shattered by what could have been heavy winds or hail a long while ago, welcoming in a winter breeze from outside. But with a highly rugged and stuffed-up crowd, it felt oddly warm and welcoming as I stood by the center doorway that split the crowd right down the middle like a knife, a passage that led all the way down to the stage where I could see the king and his queen on large throne chairs, waiting to see if I was the last member of their army to arrive. Before the elite guards came in from behind me, I moved to take a spot second row on the left, where some gnolls saw me and scrunched themselves inwards to give me a spot inside. We were deep inside their murderous coven, and there was simply no surrender or retreat with every decision we made from then on. My own instincts were to just accept the stranger's invitation and situate myself alone amongst the odor of damp clothes and body heat, while 100 oblivious enemies offered me a spot at the very edge of the aisle. I spotted Arlo and Radamant, who were still together and looking backwards to find where I was. They were both one row ahead of me, but on the right-hand side, blocked by many big bodies and faces. We had all lost each other to separate entries as we scattered randomly within the crowd. I gave Arlo and Radamant a short smile and the tiniest of waves to let them know I thought we were in a good position and were all right. However, their gazes were torn from mine by the clash of metal splintering wood and the doors behind us screeching open. Enslaved members of this world's horde were wheeling in thick old cages that grabbed everyone's attention all at once. Inside them were huge and angry desert scorpions covered under luscious liquid gold scales. The shine from the scales reflected the wall torch's light and blinded the crowds upon the scorpion's gradual approach down the middle aisles. 2 by 2, like a husband and wife walking down the aisle, cages were carefully pulled as those prisoners tugging the carts did their best to avoid letting anyone in the crowd be pierced or severed by the scorpion's striking tail stingers as they continuously stabbed through the bars of their cages, trying to attack whatever was closest to them. The cages only stopped once they reached the front stage drop below Midas and his throne chair, the beast staring at him unhappily but submissively towards a male master in a dressing gown who was quick to come down those doors right afterwards. That Midas was the skinny, scathed man I saw back at Ambervale. He had a barbed crown of thorns upon his head, while long gray strands of hair came out of it and drooped down his face without direction. Like the very land he owned, he, too, seemed like he was in a state of corruption and decay. He didn't look like he ever ate food or washed himself, or ever closed the two baggy black sleepless eyes he had, as he jumped down from the stage enthusiastically in order to shake the hand of the overlord who'd brought the beasts before him. It was a foreigner who had a fancy white desert robe, like one of the Badlands pharaohs I had seen in the Hotel Capricorn Pyramid. That man was clearly responsible for training and delivering those monstrosities to him. A dwarfish goblin who seemed to be very chummy with the king, and the profits that would ensue working with a king who could clearly turn anything he desired into gold. It would have been a horrible way to die, as with skin as strong as metal, no spider could defeat those scaly beasts. Nor were they all we had to concern ourselves about. That goblin overlord was just one of many mercenaries to walk down the aisle, second to the Sand King Eris, who brought with him a full fleet of pirates and 5 or 6 gold-flying ants that were pushed up onto the stage, along with other warlord archers who came on dreadful crickets with legs bending unnaturally backwards because of 2 knee joints on each leg that could be retracted and spring off of. He had many generals of which he had entrenched with gold riches. Pilly being one of the archers who was already in attendance but last to jump onto stage and be welcomed by the king, hugging him real superficially, only to then have to bend down and kiss the ring that sat on his finger, before taking her side among all the other loyal lieutenants. On the left side of Midas's chair stood his queen, who smiled wickedly as she talked to the desert goblin imp who came up to greet her like family, unveiling one large ostentatious gold key that hung on a chain around his neck, what appeared to be the master key to all those cages his slaves were trying to heave up the side ramps and get up on the flat level elevated stage. Midas's great hall began to dim, the lights being smothered out intentionally, as those with wooden oil lamps took them out from the walls to carry, moving them towards the cage, but being vigilant not to bring them too close to the double-stacked crates filled with oil drums just before the ramps of the stage. There was a lot to watch out for, but I couldn't keep my eyes off Midas's Queen Camilla. She looked so unfamiliar to the virtuous dame we all loved and depended on back home. This one was someone who seemed broken and crushed on the inside, but was as tough and fierce as a goddess of war on the outside. She had 2 long swords that looked like they could link into one sharp thrusting pole, but there were no banners on her back, but rather something else much more confronting. She had wings like a fiery dragon, although tucked up and painted black, which made them hard to see in the lowered light. They were proper metaphoric wings like the angels were said to have, but these were drenched under a thick black tar-like oil. It was an oddity of nature so extraordinary I couldn't have even mentioned it to anyone if I couldn't see it and re-see it again and again before my own eyes. But then I started really looking around at the others among me, seeing scales instead of skin of the stranger beside me, watching him take off his metal claws so that he could scratch his head and unveil a part of the hood that hid his eyes and face. When he saw me looking at him, he smiled in greeting. 2 sharp canine fangs were present within his teeth, horror hitting me quietly as I realized the nightmare was real and we were not as prepared for what would come next as we had originally thought. I wasn't a witness to a deceit or a magic trick. The wings Camilla had weren't synthetic or created from dusty moisture and shadow. These monsters were the real deal, not fake sculptures and puffy fantasy like the ones I could create. "So this is it, my brethren," Midas called out, the room falling quiet the second he did so. "It's the end for us. We are all that's left of our homeland," he continued to shout. "Our scouts have confirmed their whispers to be true. They have in their possession a new, much stronger crystal than the one before, free of cracks and glitches, enough to eliminate us for good." He warmed his crowd. "So I offer you all this one last chance, not to grab and steal what you need to survive the month, but to finally make a stand, to take their land for ourselves," he roared. The crowd mildly began cheering his announcement of immediate war, his wife disappearing like dust only to grip the gateway stone, followed by an explosion of light that sparkled out from the vertical bubble of our world as the sight of our castle from the dark mountainous hills came into view from the blackish blue portal she had constructed. "No tolerance, no forgiveness, no surrender," he incited. Show any one of them mercy, and I'll personally consider you one of them," he threatened, falling quiet as a soldier jumped onto the stage and whispered something in Midas's ear, interrupting that moment. The words being said had turned his head in surprise as he began to look out among the entirety of the crowd. "I thought I smelled bath soap," he chuckled. "Apparently there's royalty with us today," he stated with a scary yet sadistic smirk. My heart pounded as the soldiers looked from left to right, searching for the obvious intruders. In their midst, us. "Don't try and hide. It won't take long to sniff you all out," Midas sinisterly provoked, perhaps potentially afraid of the delay it would take to do so while we all stood stiff and quiet among the crowd. My stomach twisted as Arlo was first to speak. "Are you at war with hygiene now too?" he slandered, pulling off his shroud as boldly and as proudly as he could do without noticeable quiver. Revealing himself to all, he separated himself into the aisles before Radamant could be seen as a similar conspirator. The room jolted backwards in a shocked surprise of his presence. Although quick to pull spears from walls and the claws and small swords hidden under their shrouds, as they created a ring of sharp objects that were pointed to him upon all angles. "Wait," Midas called out, waving his men to stand down. "That's not how we treat new guests. And I have to say, it was nice for one of you to finally make the effort to come down here. Even if you're not just a little bit too late," he stated, jumping down from the stage and coming down to look Arlo in the eyes. "Now, what about the rest of you?" the king asked, a victorious smile already spreading across his face as his eyes scanned the area around the prince, trying to spot the rest of us. "Don't be shy." "I came alone," Arlo said, the king scoffing and laughing immediately upon him saying it, our nervous prince drawing out his sword within the conversation's break, while no one around him was prepared for it. "Liar," he responded. "You think I would send any of my own people into your madhouse?" Arlo quipped. "Evidently you did," he answered, looking to Pili, an archer with her bow pointed at the ready towards Arlo and Midas as they stood within a ring of soldiers. "Midas, this might be hard for you to believe, but I didn't come here to fight," Arlo said defensively. "I came here to negotiate and to help," Arlo stated, lowering his sword and turning the blade to face the creaky black wooden slats on the floorboards. "And who says we want your help?" Midas disputed, starting to advance and walk in slow confronting circles around the prince, absurdly confident despite only having a rag and some gold-linked chains dangling from his arm to arm himself up with. "You do need my help, whether you want to admit that or not," Arlo added, his dread becoming more obvious to those around him upon the realization their king was not a proper body and mind. "You're wrong," Midas added calmly. "Perhaps none of us want to be saved," he stated, leaving each one in the crowd staring towards him with eyes of discord and sadness. Men and women too afraid to speak up, but virtually pleading for their king to see some level of reason and hear what my prince had come there to offer. "You killed your son, Midas," the prince dared to say, the whole room shuffling and stepping back in dread of those words, everyone looking fearfully to their frozen king, who stopped circling Arlo as his face turned to pure hatred. "You did that!" he screamed ruthlessly, spitting into Arlo's face as he ran point blank up to Arlo, ignoring the sword still by Arlo and his own feet while an entire floor shook unsteadily as two mad eyes remained fixed to my prince. The unstable king then retreated as he began to cough sickly as he overexerted himself, taking a second to breathe and recompose himself while his wife held open the gate for animals to pass through, waiting in angst for her moment to let go of the portal and use those blackened wings to fly over and intervene. "You think you can stall us long enough for the spire to be reinstalled," said Midas. "And I'm sure you're even willing to die for it," he added before another series of sickly worried coughs. "I respect you for that. So I want you to know that your death was nothing personal," he stated, followed by the prince drawing his sword and bracing himself for Midas to turn and advance. "Fight me for it, then," Arlo provoked. "Don't flatter yourself in thinking your death might be worth my valuable time," the king smugly quipped. "If it were any day but today, then yeah, maybe. But your death won't be by my hand tonight," he added, leaving the ring of soldiers and walking away from Arlo, as with a forward wave of his hand, he ordered all of his grunt soldiers to follow him onto the stage. "Start deactivating the portal, dear," he called to his wife as he moved back towards her, and the puddling blue bubble to our nighttime world. "Forget about his friends. Just make sure he's left here in the darkness. he said to his wife before venturing off through forward gusts of her wormhole. I had to make a choice of whether I was going to stay or go. I was being pushed forwards by a crowd desperate to make it through the portal before its slow and wobbly collapse. But before I could spot any of my friends, my shadow reemerged from mere absence, puffing out as it covered Arlo's back in a thick hide of cloudy leather while Camilla stood unknowingly behind him. Unbeknownst to either of us, she had already snuck up behind him and attempted to stab him, but was both caught and shocked by a hump that padded the impact of the blades, as with it, the inability to retrieve two swords from that mist, as it continued to swallow and grip onto them. Her struggle was short-lived, as she had no choice but to release them and disappear into the air when Arlo realized what had happened and swung his own sword back in defense. The queen's huge wings were fully expanded out, like a gothic black butterfly. She herself was made half of smoke and half of flesh, constantly vanishing and reappearing around the room like a ghost, collecting materials from all corners but doing so too fast for either Arlo or me to properly scout. Once again my dark protector had made a decision without my knowledge or instruction. As from a blubbed hunch gripping Arlo's back, it took the form of a man that chased the queen, wielding her very own short twin blades upon two of its four ambidextrous grown hands. My shadow a hydra as each hand and head severed by the slice of her wings, built two more to keep the queen preoccupied, gifting us one short chance to escape. But before I could break free from the rushing crowds, the queen clicked together two rings on her finger and created a spark that set her wings completely on fire. Powered by the oil she lathered her wings and walls with, in one dive she tackled and pushed my shadow up against the wall, smothering it under a blanket of growing and searing flames. My shadow shrunk and shrunk until it was no bigger than a child, as without eyes to convey what it wanted to say to me. Its head turned to look for me but failed and then burned up with the cinders. That was the very last time I ever got to see it, or got to know what it was and how it was so different to all the constructs that I had made before it. It was so lifelike to watch that dark avatar die. To me it felt almost as if the death of a family member or friend, enough to force my own intervention as I threw back my hood and yanked out my hidden necklace, breaking it from its chain just so I could smother the light in between my fingers and sift together one mighty claw to strike at the fiery queen, who remained close to the left wall, unaware of my presence. I thought I came at her as quick as a lightning bolt, my condensed claws screeching as I sliced through hot stone church wall with one furious slashing swing. But just like my protector, with a single puff of smoke, she had disappeared. I spun in circles, wondering which angle she was going to come at me from. Bugs, amphibians, and four-legged critters of all natures known to me were beginning to grow out of the ground as I felt the panic of the mistake I had just made. Fearing for my safety as Arlo stepped over animals puffing into dust under the fires while the queen reappeared along the wall near to us, bending down to pick up her twin steel blades once again. In mere moments, the majority of gnolls had already fled the room through the portal before the fire began to reach the roof and cover all four corner walls. The queen's horde of gnoll minions all arching their backs and dropping onto all four limbs before they vaulted through the gateway portal, leaving only a tiny group of gnolls remaining behind in wait. As from 10 to 100 degrees in the space of a minute, I was already feeling the heat weakening me and stalling my judgment. Each rapid blink, made from sweat, hitting my eyes, was potentially a moment Camilla would appear beside me. The retrieval of her swords made her the most deadly weapon, and with a leap I was fully expecting, she still managed to catch me off guard. She had clipped my winter's cloak with the tip of her blade, as I was yanked backwards to the floor in quick defense by my prince, the two of them lunging and thrusting in all directions, rumbling the floor and bringing down the roof with the strength of Arlo's heavy bursting swings against wall and floor. The floor was so hot it felt wet like a puddle. I got up as quick as I could, only to look up and dive away from falling beams that broke and smashed into the floor, opening up the roof to the cold air outside. I began covering my head with my hands as tiles and other small roof matter loosely started crashing against me as I tried to re-rise, but my eyes were stuck staring at the portal that had become unstable and was dwindling. And as crazy as it sounds, I was actually glad for the most part that Anara put the prisoner's welfare before Arlo and mine, that we had done our duty and at least ensured one survivor was coming home to tell the tale of what was happening. One hero that could tell a Coney and work out a solution to save both worlds from the chaos about to rain down upon each of them. I helplessly watched as Camilla caught and dragged Arlo above the roof and into the sky, breaking free from her grip high up only to free fall without a net to catch him. I stuck up my hands, trying to build something that could stifle his fall, but horrifically nothing would form under the heat. I was powerless. I'm forced to watch him hit the ground and break through the floorboard slats upon his collapse. I limped over to him, only to put my arms around him once more. We were surrounded by flames, and I feared that this was simply our end. I was coughing profusely while he was too delirious to do the same. Out of pure strife and determination to survive, somehow I managed to dodge the swipe of a sword and fall away from the lethal clutches of the fiery queen. Although after 2 or 3 more crawling rolls, I couldn't escape her and just gave up. The fiery queen could block the debris with her wings like an umbrella and had no fear of fire, nor a lack of air like me, who was gasping for breath. My eyes closed as I saw the thrust of both her swords coming towards me. My eyes only reopening some manner of time just after to see the face of Pilly up on the stage, pulling back her bow as invisible arrows flung from its line. The young woman shooting arrow after arrow as she barrel rolled down stage towards us, piercing holes in the wings of an attacking queen. "Get out of here!" Pilly screamed to me. And just like that, I could move again, pulling myself along cracked heated floorboards as I scampered towards my unconscious prince. Close to the embers of a fallen beam in flames, I tried to pull him free from the crevice he had made on his collision with the ground. But all I did was succeed in burning my hand. "Wake up!" I yelled, slapping his cheeks, trying to wake him, finding nothing else I could do but put the back of his hand beside the log just like mine, the instant heat forcing him to wake with a sharp scream of pain. "Come on!" I begged, grabbing the same hand as I tried to tug him along with me. The two of us unable to see anything other than our target up on stage, the portal squishing thin and yet rising high. I leaned against Arlo as he struggled to stand, trying to reach and roll up over the elevated platform that was the top theater level stage, together fighting to reach a near non-existent portal back home. We both gripped either side of Midas's gold throne chair as we stood up against the short resisting push of gravity, only to overcome it as we dropped down and tumbled through the tiny black diminishing wormhole in joint collapse.